Dean, we're going back over 20 years ago now. You were 21, fresh out of journalism school, and you landed a job at the Daily Mirror, your ambition to be a showbiz journalist. Take me back to the world at that time when tabloid met celebrity. What was it like?
I mean, it was the height of celebrity culture, wasn't it? It was kind of when everything exploded. We didn't have social media, we didn't have Twitter and Instagram and all of that. You know, we were just getting to the point where Big Brother was launching, so reality TV hadn't even hit. You know, celebrity was booming and it was huge business. It was what sold papers.
What was the pressure like to land the big stories, to get the big exclusives and make the front page? Because there was so much competition at that time between rival tabloids.
You know, it was very competitive with The Sun and the Sunday newspapers, and my job really was to get out there and hit the nightclubs and the red carpets and make sure I was getting the interaction with the celebrities themselves. But, you know, if The Sun didn't leave the club till 3 a.m, you didn't leave till 3:10. And I was, I guess you could call it the secret assassin, because I was with the 3 a.m. girls, you know, they did their thing and their pictures with everyone, and I wasn't known, so no one knew who I was. I slipped in, got the goss and ran out.
But in terms of the pressure in the newsroom to get these big stories, what was that like? Not for you personally, but overall the culture in there to get the exclusive, to get the private stories that nobody knew about.
I mean, those were the stories that the news desk really wanted you to get. They wanted you to find out who was having affairs, who was having a secret baby, who was, you know, going to the dodgy sex clubs. You know, it was kind of disgusting, really, because the people's woes and things that went wrong in their lives were huge sellers. And, you know, it's not like now. They were selling over 3 million copies a day. You know, newspapers were very big business, and a celebrity or politician or royal being involved just meant that your sales were going to soar through.
You'll be aware, of course, of the judge's ruling last week on the Mirror Group. The judge found, Justice Fancourt, that phone hacking was widespread and habitual from 1998, and it remained extensive from 2006 to 2011. You worked at the Daily Mirror and at the People. What was your experience of phone hacking?
I mean, when I walked in, you know, a very young, wide-eyed, bushy-tailed, and I'm just wondering why everybody had phones on their desks. There were like multiple phones on certain people's desks. And I was always told it was because, you know, the readers were going to call in and we'd get a lot of crank calls anyway. You know, the reality of working there was not everybody was phone hacking. You know, I'm able to talk about it because I've got a completely clear conscience about the fact that I was never involved in it. But there were people at the paper that did phone hack. You know, there were certain people on each desk, and they were usually away from the main throng of the editorial team. So, you know, on Showbiz, for example, you know, we knew what they did, and we knew that their exclusives were coming from the phones. You know, it was a Voldemort scenario as far as you didn't openly talk about it, but everybody knew that it was going on. And it's quite funny looking back on it now, because, you know, we were a full newsroom then, and still people are kind of Voldemort about the whole phone hacking subject. You know, it's not something that people are talking about.
Yeah, well, you're just one of a handful, a very small handful of former journalists at the Mirror Group who have spoken out. Why is that? Why is there such a deafening silence when you think there were hundreds of journalists there? You say only a small number of people were actually involved in phone hacking, but it seems, you know, the judge said it was widespread and habitual. People openly knew about this?
I think when you step out of tabloids and you look back at it, I think a number of us were kind of scarred by it all, because we realised the moral implications of what we were doing. You know, we were ruining people's lives. I say we, obviously a certain element of the paper was, and their torture and trauma was our plaything, and we were able to put it on the front page and sell copies. You know, there wasn't any thought about mental health or about where people were in their lives or what it was doing to the actual victim of it.
Piers Morgan was your editor at the time. What was he like as a boss?
He was a brilliant boss. I mean, do you know what? Piers, you can't knock it. I think as an editor, very supportive, you know, 100% behind your growth, and, you know, he took time to help you with your writing. We weren't like hugely in direct contact because each department would have their head, but God, you can't knock the support of him as an editor.
The judge said about him last week, that he found it convincing that Piers Morgan knew about phone hacking when he was in charge of the Daily Mirror. Piers Morgan responded to that. He said, "I've never hacked a phone or told anyone else to hack a phone. No one has produced evidence to prove otherwise." And he also points out that he wasn't asked to give evidence. He wasn't invited to be a witness at this trial. In fact, the Mirror Group didn't defend him when certain allegations were made about him. So Piers Morgan has made his position very clear. He never hacked a phone or told anyone else to hack a phone.
I mean, look, if you're a national newspaper editor and you've got all of this power and you're deciding what the narrative is for the Daily Mirror, if you're an editor on a local newspaper, the first thing you're going to say is, where did that story come from? So I find that quite amusing and kind of ridiculous, because that's the first port of call as an editor and as a journalist. You want to know where the story came from. But there is an open conversation that I feel is important about the way that those newspapers did work in those days. And it wasn't good what they were doing. And it would be nice if people started to get to the point where they accepted some responsibility for what they put people through.
The judge found certain witnesses credible in their accounts, which is what he is basing his judgment on. He also said the board directors, the legal department and editors knew, and in light of that,
I mean,
do you find the denies credible?
The legal department definitely knew. Like, you can remember that they would waft in and they knew what was going on. I don't know about the board directors, Sly Bailey. I can't
because you didn't have any direct dealings with them.
I was
but the legal
21.
department you did.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they'd always come down, and if you ever had a problem with legalities on a story, then they were part of the process of trying to get the story over the line.
Phone hacking is what this particular trial has centred on and what the focus has been on. But Justice Fancourt acknowledged that other forms of dishonest information gathering were prevalent.
Yeah.
What did you know about, and what during your time at the Daily Mirror and the People were you asked to do?
The worst thing that I was ever asked, and it was probably ultimately what made me walk from the job at the People, was Coronation Street star Tracy Shaw. Mm-hmm. She was having a lot of issues in those days, addiction problems, but she was very big news. She was on the front cover all the time. And I was called over at one point and said that I was going to go to a spa and I was going to have a spa break. And I thought, brilliant. And they said, and you're going to have a bunch of flowers and we're going to put a bug in it and we're going to deliver it to Tracy Shaw. And then we booked you the room right next door to her and you're just going to stay up all night and write down everything that's gone on. And I went, no, I'm just not doing that. And just point blank refused. And I guess, there's enough whippersnappers that want to further their career that probably would have bugged the flowers, but it's not morally right, and it's kind of illegal. And also, you're kicking an actress when she's down.
Showbiz desks at that time, was the illegal gathering of information the main source of stories, do you think? You never did it. You did it the traditional way, red carpets, building relationships with celebrities. But do you feel like the big exclusive, the big scoops mainly came from underhand means? I
mean, look, the phone hacking is, you only have to look at the front pages in those days to just realise how many stories were coming from that. It wasn't just the odd one, it was endless amounts. Even speaking to people like Dan Evans, who were at the paper, and you could say he was groomed into doing the phone hacking at the Mirror Group.
He's a former journalist who was one of the original whistleblowers on it.
Exactly. Yeah. So he was there, I think, just after I moved, but he was at 2003. Their job was to make a database and to have the PIN codes and to do that as a career. And I feel like, even though I wasn't involved in that, we've all gone through a cathartic kind of process, and almost like a PTSD. Of realising what we were being told to do, and the normality of what we were doing as part of that newspaper group. It wasn't acceptable.
Because the narrative has been, a lot of the time, they're celebrities, they should know how to play the game.
Yeah, I mean, this is the Prince Harry aspect, isn't it? Because, so much of what's being written, and I completely get, the male journalists and people are going to really rip him to shreds. He's done a book, he's exposed the royal family. Let's just reverse this. He lost his mum, he had to live in the public eye. He had to navigate all of his relationships under the spotlight, completely not trusting everyone. He couldn't go to anywhere. You know, I used to see him in Bougie. He was just thinking that everybody was going to sell a story out on him.
Prince Harry is almost one of the last ones standing when you look at how many celebrities have settled for various different reasons, whether it's the legal fees, you know, just wanting to have an end to it all.
Yeah.
You know, what do you think about Prince Harry's commitment to this?
I feel like Prince Harry is quite right to just continue his mission to re-establish what press standards are now, because I think that's the biggest thing that I'm unhappy with, is the fact that journalism as a whole has been tainted by all of this. It's not getting stories through sources and working hard and putting the graft in, it's flipping a phone.
Is there anything that you want to say? Obviously, you sit here today and you're talking to me because you have a clear conscience. You've had 20 years to reflect on this, and people have come up to you, and when they find out where you work, the first question they ask is, did you phone hack?
Yeah.
What is it that you want to leave people with? Is it an apology? Is it a reflection? It's 20 years on, you sit here with a clear conscience, but what do you want to say about that time and about what happened?
We need to start accepting responsibility for what we were involved in, and I feel like there's a number of editors and journalists and people that are involved that are not telling the truth, and I'm sick of it. And I think a lot of people in the industry are sick of it, because we're all sat there saying, come on, you know what you did. Hold your hands up, accept responsibility, get yourself a clear conscience and move on.